Mubarak to everybody. And then I'd like to say a few words about why I chose myself for this lecture. Actually, my husband and I were recently in India. We just got home before the close down of India. And our purpose by being there is actually to investigate the growth of Hindutva during the present rule of Modi and to write a book about that. As some of you may know by now, before we have published books both on Pakistan and on Afghanistan in 2010 and 2014 respectively. We hope this book will be out by next year. Unfortunately, it will be in Norwegian, but I would recommend you plenty of other books. Last thing I'll say before I start sharing my screen is that during the lecture, if you have questions to ask, you can put them on the chat so that particularly Altaf or Rachel can register them, and we can then address them shortly, at least before the next speaker. So then I'll try to share my screen here. Where is the, hey, it's not supposed to, oh my. Where is my show all windows here, right? That was strange. I just put it up here. So wait a minute then. I'll have to close some other ones. I wonder why they're up. How can I do that? Sorry, this is an unexpected thing. I was thinking since I put it up here, it would appear on my own. Wait a minute then. I'm fumbling a little bit here. Just a second. It is here, yeah. So this went so well last time. So I was expecting it to do this time too. If I exit the full screen, how can I then share?
Are we having a problem there?
I have it up now, but can you see it? No.
No, I can't.
You can't. Why is it? It's supposed to be on my desktop here, but it's not appearing there for some weird reason. It's so many others are appearing from last time, but I don't know how to close them. I wonder if you could put it up from your side. Can you?
I'll do that.
Just to not to lose time. Yeah, you can do that.
Here it is.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This hasn't happened to me before, and it's very strange.
It's
but
okay. It happens. Not a big
yeah,
deal.
and I will just tell you when to change picture. Okay.
I'll do it. Don't worry.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, our travel, while he starts sharing the screen, I can tell our travel went to Delhi first, and then we went from there, after having met a lot of people there, we went to Ahmedabad, where there were quite some events in 2002 that I'll tell you about, and from there back to Delhi and then to Calcutta. And after Calcutta, thank you. Yeah, okay. Great, I can see it. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. And then to Hyderabad, which is in the heart of India, and those of you who know the history know that Hyderabad was ruled by the Nizam and was sort of sorry not to be joining Pakistan, but it was geographically impossible since its location was in the middle of India. And then back to Delhi, and then we had to deal with the corona crisis. You can go to slide number 2, Altaf.
Okay. So
you just press the
okay.
That's good. Yeah. So today's lecture will be on these issues, and I'd first like to ask you, when you see this picture, does it remind you of other media representations you've been through? I think it might. You can tell me on the chat. But to my mind, not in history, cartoon crisis, to more recent history, we've seen these pictures of angry Muslim men, but I would say that the angry Hindu men, they don't look that different after these anger situations. And you see one of the examples of that here. So I will just present some events where Hindutva came into play and define it further, explore some roots, and present some actual traits like historical revisionism, which means also remaining of cities and changing the curriculum, and the media situation. But this is a very complicated issue. I mean, this is just some tidbits of a very big issue. I could maybe go on for a week about it. From what I've learned till now, we have like 30 books on the issues, waiting some of them to be read, some are read. So that is to be said before I start, I think. So now let's go to the next. Next slide, please. You can just use the arrows, I think. Yeah. So let us start. This is not really the start of Hindutva, but it is a very major event. You may know all this, but Gandhi was assassinated on the 30th of January in 48. He was on his way to a prayer meeting, but he was shot 3 times by a man called Nathuram Godse. And this Godse figure is quite a central one to this issue. I'll come back to him. He was a member of the RSS, I'll tell you shortly what that is, and the Hindu Mahasabha, both of which are Hindutva organizations. And for this deed, he was hanged on the 15th of November in 1949. And you see the picture here, which is from the Gandhi Museum in Ahmedabad, and it's about the Salt March that he conducted in 1930. So there was a 90-year anniversary from the march that he conducted then to show that they could be self-reliant when it comes to salt, extracting it from the sea. So they all went from Ahmedabad to somewhere along the coast further south, and some activists Salt March and went from village to village talking about his legacy. Next. Yeah, next. Yeah, and this was the assassination of Gandhi was just half a year after the partition happened, which Gandhi was opposed to, and he preached the reconciliation between Hindus and Muslims. Next, please. After 1948, there were many events which had to do with Hindutva and also with the contradictions and oppositions between Hindus, majority and minorities. I'm not talking about the Sikhs, for example, Operation Blue Star, which was conducted by Indira Gandhi, but just a few cases that had to do with the Hindu-Muslim relationship. Long before 1992, there had been agitation among the Hindutva adherents about a mosque in Ayodhya, which was said to be built upon a Ram temple. So in 1992, a gang of activists from these organizations demolished the mosque, and then they were actually celebrated by quite a few people around the country. And then let's jump 10 years ahead. We come to Gujarat in 2002, which maybe is a very much more known event to people. Some Hindu pilgrims were killed in a train coach fire coming back to Ahmedabad from elsewhere. Muslims were blamed for having thrown some kind of fire things into the compartment of the train coach. And after that followed a widespread attack on Muslims in the state capital of Ahmedabad, where Narendra Modi, now the Prime Minister of India, he was then the Chief Minister of Gujarat, which is also the home state of Gandhi himself. I happen to have come across a report made by some of my contacts in India who have made a huge technical investigation. And their conclusion is that there was no Muslim attack as such on the coach, but that there was some inner problems that caused the coach to come on fire. This report was somehow in the media in 2005 when it was issued, but it was soon forgotten. But this is very important to think of how pretext can be used for going on a big killing spree. And around 2,000 Muslims in and around Ahmedabad were killed in 2002. And many were driven from their homes into refugee camps. And when I talked to people there, they could still remember, and that was really a very hard time for them. And there's a lot of dissent and hatred towards the current Prime Minister in India because of this. And then again, in Northeast Delhi 2020, in the beginning of the year, February, there were attacks by special gundas, we call them, against CIA protesters. These gundas, or these thugs, were inspired, no doubt, by some of these organizations that I'll tell you more about. It started actually, next slide, please. It started as a protest against the CAA, and therefore I'm explaining this now. It's the Citizen Amendment Act. You may all have heard about it, which is about giving repatriation or citizenship to people from various religions who came to India before 2015. But it does not apply to Muslims, which of course has caused a lot of anger among Muslims, which means then that people coming from, for example, Bangladesh, who have roots in India, people coming from Myanmar and elsewhere will be denied citizenship, but not Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, and Christians. So that is part of the root of the recent anger. And the other one linked to this is the National Register of Citizens, which can pose an existential threat to residing Muslims, because not all poor people carry, for example, an ID card, and they might easily then be identified as Muslims and then expelled from the country. So this is kind of the background here. And therefore you see a slogan like you see at the right hand of the picture here, where they want to boycott the NRC, which is kind of presented as a kind of a census, but also to reject the CAA. Next one. Yeah, Northeast Delhi started as a peaceful sit-in protest before the new year, mainly by Muslim women actually, sitting and protesting in it's near a metro station in Northeast Delhi. So on the 22nd, 23rd of February, violent attacks by BJP supporters, we could call them that too, because many of the BJP supporters belong to these other Hindutva organizations. And the fighting left at least 53 dead and hundreds of wounded, mainly Muslims, and much property was destroyed and set on fire by these, for example, RSS thugs. I'll tell you more about the RSS in a moment. What I was told by my friends who were working for some, let's call them critical media, was that, for example, there was an open register where these thugs could contact, and they could find out if there was a car they suspected belonged to a Muslim. They could actually find out by contacting this open source. And then if they found out it was a car owned by a Muslim, they would set it on fire. I mean, in Norway, I don't know about elsewhere, there are rules for access to such registers. You cannot automatically go in online. But here, this was an open online thing, which of course caused even more loss of property. And many people were driven from their homes, homes were lost. This was an area where mainly Muslims lived, and many of them sort of small business Muslims who worked with repair shops and the similar, and who then lost, of course, their source of income. The police were standing idle, and the Interior Minister of India, Amit Shah, who is criticized and often thought of as even more, let's say, devoted to Hindutva than the Prime Minister himself, he harvested a lot of critique. But also, we have to look at the background here. There was a political context. The BJP lost the elections in Delhi for the second time to the AAP party, which is kind of a, well, center left-wing leaning sort of populist party with a rather popular leader who has actually delivered, as they say, to the citizens some goods such as more water, electricity, and so on. But also this party, I guess for fear of losing support, were inactive during these pogroms, as we call them. Pogrom is an old word that was used also to characterize the ways in which Jews were treated in Eastern Europe in the 19th century onwards. But so many politicians, leading politicians, not only of the BJP, they were standing idle or even maybe secretly voting. Next slide, please. So then we have to have a definition of Hindutva, sort of. First, I have to underline that Hindutva is not Hinduism. I mean, it's not synonymous to the Hinduist religion. I think we can say the same for Islam is not the same as Islamic extremism, right? So there are some similarities between how these extremisms work. They play on religion, but they do not replace, and they are not the same as the religion. On the other hand, as Punyani, one of the books I read, says, it's a kind of synthesis of religion and politics. This might ring a bell with you too. Hindutva is the politics based on the values of Brahmanism. That is particular, of course, to India. Brahmanism being, if we look very back throughout the centuries of Hinduism, we find that there were varieties of Brahmanism, some we're talking now maybe 6th, 7th century in our reckoning of time, there were directions within Hinduism which were opposed to the caste system. I'm sure you're aware of the caste system. But those were gradually overpowered by the dominant branch of Brahmanism. Another definition, Hinduism is the ideology of Hindu Rashtra, of creating a Hindu state. I mean, having a state dominated by Hinduism, not just a home to Hindus and others, but a Hindu state. This is Noorani, 2002. 3 essentials, Noorani says, come into the picture here. One is that we share a common nation. They share a common nation, a common race, jati, and this is built on the idea that Aryan is sort of the original inhabitants of India, not the Dravidians in South India, for example, which are sort of historically meant able to be the original citizens. And also a common civilization. This is a cultural definition, Sanskriti, Hindu culture. So all in all, based on race, language, and culture. Next slide, please. Now you see right to the right, you saw the picture of Daughter of God. So can we go back? Back to the last one. Yeah. This is from a rather critical and very interesting magazine they have in India, which has a long story of how Nathuram Godse grew up and was groomed to be the killer of Gandhi, actually. And also how he had been said to not have been in both these Hindutva organizations, but this article proves that he was actually for his lifetime after he joined. Yeah, and next. Yeah, then to the Hindutva network. This is a complicated story again, and I won't be able to go into all detail because there are lots of more organizations than the ones I mentioned here. But the first organization to mention is the Hindu Mahasabha from 1915 onwards. Actually, this organization was very strong and numerous, but it went into decline after being banned after the murder of Gandhi, because this Gandhi murder was very much associated with the Hindu Mahasabha. You see to the right here, you see it has somehow recuperated in the last year, perhaps also helped by people in power now. This is a leader on the state level called Shakun Pandey, and she actually shoots at the Gandhi effigy at his death anniversary this year. This is rather extreme, I think. So there is the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, which was created 10 years after the Hindu Mahasabha. And this is the stronghold, maybe the strongest organization, with approximately 6 million members across the country and up to 60,000 branches in cities and villages across the country. And these are activists. The Sangh Parivar is another expression you may come across. This is an umbrella network of many of the Hindutva organizations, also the ruling BJP. And it also consists of organizations such as more militant, military organizations, armed wing student organizations, youth organizations, etc., etc. Then many of you might have heard of the Shiv Sena, which was created seemingly late in 1966. This is an organization which also belongs to the larger network of Sangh Parivar, but it's mainly dominant in Maharashtra. On the other hand, there it is the ruling party. Yeah, next, please. So a little bit about media then, since this is actually a course on media and extremism. First, a kind of sad picture. The Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index from 2020 ranks India at number 142. So down from 140 in 2019 and from 133 in 2016. On the other hand, Pakistan doesn't seem to rank better. 145, 142 in 2019 and 147 in 2016. So it is sort of down from 2016, but I mean, on the right track from 2016, but not from last year. And I will not dwell too much with the fact that 4 of the 5 Nordic countries, excluding Iceland, is on top, with Norway in the lead, actually. We have our problems too, but we will not talk about them. As you see to the right here is a quote from New York Times, a very recent one, as you can see, on the 18th of April, which actually talks about how Mr. Modi has tackled the media during the corona crisis. So he met then with top news executives after announcing the largest lockdown, and he urged them to publish inspiring and positive stories about government efforts. So not criticizing anything about the government's efforts. And then when many migrant workers were stranded, they were trying to walk their way home, many for like 100 to 150 kilometers back to the villages when they lost their jobs in the cities. And some of them died along the highways for lack of food and water. And then there were lawyers persuading the Supreme Court to order all media to publish the official version of the coronavirus developments. But of course, there are outlets who are carrying independent reporting. And I could mention a few of those. You have, for example, The Wire, which is an important one. You have also the magazines, which are both online and offline, Frontline, Outlook, and you have one called the Click News. So there are, I mean, these exist and they're not shut down. So, and you find also that Modi is more concentrated towards curbing the TV stations than the newspapers. And perhaps it is, like I've sort of registered in Pakistan, that the English language newspapers, which more or less cater to the elite, seem more liberal and independent than the local language newspapers. But TV fares the worst. They've been stopped from airing at some point, some stations. Next, please. Yeah, this book I was given by some friends in Hyderabad, and it has a very interesting content. It's called India Misinformed, and it deals with the series upon series, sort of range topic-wise, on how fake news are spread. And sources of spreading are trolls that you find, I think, in many countries now, and scores of WhatsApp groups, which sort of thrive on fake news and hate speech. Just some examples here. There's a lot of talk about illegal immigrants from Bangladesh, from Myanmar. And there's accusations of Muslims of breeding too much, that is, having too many children, and thereby presenting a threat to the Hindu nation. And of course, there is the Kashmir issue. We all remember last year the Pulwama incident and the so-called successful bombing of Balakot, which turned out by Pakistani newspapers and investigative journalists to be just bombing some trees and some nature. But I can't go into that now, but I'm sure you're all aware of this, and I'm sure you've all covered this or read about the coverage. But then again, some examples of fake news that this book presents. There is the so-called love jihad, and what does that mean? It means that young Muslim boys are accused of targeting or flirting with Hindu girls and trying to make them their girlfriends. And that is kind of their warfare on the Hindu nation. And there's also fake news stories about Rohingya refugees who come from Myanmar, as you know, eating the flesh of Hindus, imagine. And then there is a fake news of Muslim attacks on Hindus. And such fake news have also resulted in lynchings and killings of individual Muslims. And there's also the building of the brand Modi by postings of his heroism, exaggerating his working hours, 18 to 20 hours per day, and so on and so forth. Lots of that. And the cow issue is intensifying. With some of you, I joked about the way in which some Hindu fundamentalist extremists are now recommending the drinking of cow urine. But this is serious. This is going on, actually, as we speak, as a kind of cure to the COVID-19. But also there is the issue of spreading news that some Muslim has led a cow and he's surely going to lead it to slaughter, which then means that he could be actually lynched for just the suspicion. This cow issue has another issue too, which is that the farmers who used to be able, I mean Hindus and Muslims alike, who used to be able to slaughter the cows when they were no longer productive, which means they did no longer give milk, this is hard to do now because cows are supposed to live a natural life for as long as they can, which means a lot of financial burden to many farmers, since they have to feed these cows without getting anything in return except for some, you know, the dung that can be used for fuel. So this is the sort of unofficial media mainly, but sometimes it's featured into the official media as well, or the traditional media. Thank you. Next. Yeah, I have to say a few words about the Hindutva paradoxes. These are pictures from Gujarat 2020. I was able to catch some of the posters who were still up after President Trump's visit. And as you can see from the right-hand picture, it says, "Welcome to the land of Mahatma Gandhi." In a parenthesis, I'll have to mention that this visit, which lasted for less than 3 hours and was taking place on a big stadium in Gujarat, it cost crores and crores of Indian rupees, immensely expensive. And so much was changed, and so many people were chased, and poor people had to evacuate because they were putting up a good image for the President Trump who visited this city. My critical friends say that this was probably the only city to which he could be invited to see India, because here the BJP has a very solid control. But the irony and the paradox of Hindutva showed, among others, by this poster, is that they are exploiting Gandhi's legacy. But on the other hand, in their rank and file, you find a lot of people hailing his assassin, Nathuram Godse. We'll come back to that. Actually, nowadays, statues are raised of Nathuram Godse around the country. And this is just a sign that how can you hail Gandhi and use Gandhi, exploit Gandhi, and simultaneously hail his assassin? Another paradox you find with Hindutva is that they're trying to unite low-caste people and people, Dalits, also in their rank and file, and some actually are enticed to join. I read a book recently called "I Could Not Be Hindu" by a former member of the RSS. I'll show you the book in the end. Who actually joined them because he felt he could be a proud Hindu together with these high caste Hindus. But it turned out that, for example, when he offered food from his household in his village, nobody would touch it, and so on and so forth. So he actually exposed the leadership, which are almost inevitably high caste, not treating him and others of low caste or Dalits as equal. So that's another paradox. They try then culturally to invite Hindus of different castes to join them, while simultaneously treating them very discriminatory way. Okay, next. So then I come to the historical revisionism, and I know my time is short, but I don't have that many slides left, so I think we'll be good on time. One sign that we've seen already is how they rename cities. Some are done and some are in process or are proposed. One is, of course, the Allahabad, where you had the huge Mela every 8th year, I think it is. It's now renamed Prayagraj. Ahmedabad, the capital of Gujarat, is supposed to be renamed as Karnavati, Hindu name again. And Muzaffarnagar in UP is supposed to be renamed Lakshmi Nagar. Some of you may know that Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth in the Hindu, well, can we say the Hindu universe of gods. And there are many more to come. The other one is honoring the killer Nathuram Godse, who killed Gandhi in 1948. And there is actually a plan to rename the city of Meerut, also in UP, in his name, which can look rather strange to many of us. And then there is textbook revisionism. We see now in the textbooks of, there are organizations within the sort of the larger Hindutva umbrella working on changing the textbook, and they control many schools. We have to mention that too. And some of the changes could be like changing the wording of the national liberation struggle to a religious war against Muslims. And that the original people in India were Aryans, not Dravidians, which is also history. And not least, blackening the Mughal dynasty stories. We have read, for example, of activist Hindu women making puja within the Taj Mahal, which is, as you know very well, the huge monument built to Mumtaz Mahal, the wife of Shah Jahan, the empress, the Mughal emperor. So there are various ways in which this revisionism and this push towards more Hindutva domination in the visible culture of the country are being done. And it may seem rather frightening to those who believe in more secular state and also, of course, to religious minorities. Next slide, please. Altaf, can I have the next slide?
I'm trying. I was just trying to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What you see here is pictures then again of some of the people who actually adore the killer of Gandhi. And you were able to move the others, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to download. What's happening? I'm sorry. It's.
Maybe you could wait with that if it's the downloading of the other one, because we're having a small chat. So.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Elizabeth. I was.
No,
I think
no,
I
it's
have
fine.
my desktop is showing.
I could take some questions while we wait, if anybody wants.
Oh no. I don't know what. Yeah, sorry.
I hate. Well, if we're still in the audience, anybody who'd like to ask questions, you can do that just by raising your voice while we wait for this. It's bound to happen.
Elizabeth,
Yeah.
can I ask a question? So, is BJP connected to RSS in any way?
They are under the same big umbrella, actually, in the sense. Also, we see that many BJP members can be members of the RSS, but I don't know if they have any formal connection. But there would be quite a few members who are also members of the RSS.
Okay.
Also in the lead, among the leading figures.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I think I read this in Aisha Jalal's book that, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm mistaken, or maybe I have forgotten that maybe BJP is the political wing of RSS, but I need to recheck that.
No, that is over. No, BJP is a political party in its own right, but it has very strong relationship, you can say, by double membership and other, and also by outright support in some cases. Well, now we could just leaf through it again, I guess. No.
Are we there?
Yeah, you just have to go to the one of the last slides.
Sorry, you know what happened?
Don't tell me.
I was trying to download Professor Salim's.
Yeah, here. Yeah, I understand, but please wait with that till we finish. Then you can do it while we chat.
And which
so
one?
Was this the one? No. A little bit up.
This one.
No, up.
Here.
Former. Yeah, and then the next one from here.
Yeah, here we go. Sorry.
No. Next.
Next. Yeah, I thought that. I remembered.
Well, yeah, this one. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It was me who didn't remember. All right. Just, can you see this now? Yes. Can you all see the screen? Yeah, I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, the key, just a few words about the historic roots. I need to be short. The key person is Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, who lived from 1883 to 1966. And for some people, he's a national hero. The fact is, he was part of an assassination of some key figures and ended up jailed in the Andaman Islands in 1911 and stayed there for 12 years. But just after a rather short time, he pleaded with the British to get better treatment. And actually, which means also that he was not a leading force of the resistance movement at all. He is said to have developed hatred for Muslims. Perhaps some suggest due to that some of the guards in the prison in the Andamans were Muslims, I don't know. And he published his first essay on Hindutva in 1923 and also joined the Hindu Mahasabha at an early stage, but led it for 5 years from 37 to 42. And he was among the founders also. He was accused of planning the murder of Gandhi. So he was sitting actually on the bench together with Nathuram Godse, who actually killed Gandhi. But he was acquitted for lack of evidence. He might have had also good lawyers. I think there is not time to go into the deeper roots, but we might also mention the British divide and rule politics. Next. It's down there, I think, for the plus, no?
Yeah,
No?
I'm looking for this. Ah, no, it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah. It's not
Oh,
that
yeah.
one. Okay.
Sorry, Elizabeth. It's getting
Oh,
late.
it's up there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's up there and somehow.
I can see it. It's
Uh,
just under the green.
yeah, I know. It's not letting me into the green. That's the problem.
No, but can you do it at the side of it? You just slide by the side of it.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I'm sorry. It's all messed
this
up.
one, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Try.
Okay. I did it
Yeah,
manually.
and then the full picture, please.
Yeah.
This is some of the, I mean, Hindutva, although it's in power in India now, there has been historically, and there is, of course, current opposition to Hindutva. But, and one of the counterparts historically was, of course, the Muslim League. And some historians, I don't agree with them, would say that the Hindu extremism was a product of the opposition to the Muslim League. I don't think that's as straightforward as that. Dalits and their current leaders are very much against Hindutva and against the whole caste system and the Hindu Brahmanism. And I met quite a few student leaders who were of that nature and who were violently, or not violently, but very ardently opposed to they rely again on Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who actually was the main writer of the Indian constitution. He was a Dalit, which is then a so-called Harijan or casteless person himself, very well educated in law. He and many others converted to other religions due to the caste system, such as Islam, Sikhism, and Christianity. And of course, there were secular-minded leaders. Nehru himself was a secular-minded leader who believed that India should be treating the various minorities on an equal level. And of course, the Gandhi legacy of reconciliation, and people who today point to this Gandhi legacy, they are very much in opposition to the current leadership and Hindutva. And historically, the Nobel literary laureate Rabindranath Tagore was a leader who's more broadly on this, looked more broadly on this, together with also Swami Vivekananda. Even if they were Hindu, they had a more including face of Hinduism. So now we're approaching the second last, if not the last. If you can then again find there, yeah, right. Ah, good. To sum up, Hindutva has a long history, but with the BJP in power, this history has taken a new turn. Because when you have you have an extremism there, but you also then join it with the politics, religion and politics, and also with the power, this takes a more important and powerful turn. Today, BJP is ruling 12 of the Indian states, and they are junior partner in governments of another 8 states. That shows their power. And their success has been, although that might be a little bit dwindling, is to use culture and religions to unite and to then background social issues such as caste and class, etc. You see the picture here of a ritual puller in Calcutta. I made a story on these pullers in 1991, 92. I was astonished to see that there were quite a few hundreds left of them still in 2020, which means they run around in the streets and people are sitting on these seats. You don't have this in Pakistan, but this is actually something that has been preserved in India, and it has, of course, a social dimension. And the political leadership, I think, and this is something you can see in other countries as well, they accommodate more extreme views, perhaps in a sense of trying to neutralize them, I don't know, but for other reasons too, trying at the same time to keep somewhat a rhetorical distance, as when Modi would preach of unity and non-discrimination, while at the same time being very closely supportive of the more extreme organizations. Last slide. It's just a recommendation of literature. Up there. Yeah. This is just some suggested readings. This is just a small pile of all the books we have. I photographed it last night. But here you see some books that you could perhaps order to the library if you don't already have them. Shashi Tharoor is a Congress politician. We haven't spoken much of the Congress party, but there's reasons to say that the Congress party might have been too lenient towards these tendencies of Hindutva in recent years. But now, at least the one of the persons from the Gandhi family. The son, suddenly the name doesn't come to me, but anyway, he seems now to be, this is the son of Rajiv Gandhi. He is now sort of leading opposition towards, against Hindutva. Shashi Tharoor is another one who is actually very critical of Modi, and this is a kind of critical political biography. Arundhati Roy, you know, much of what the Kashmir issue is addressed very, very critically in this book. Noorani tells the background of the Hindutva in a very good and comprehensive way, rather short book. And then you have the personal autobiography of the man who was a Dalit who quit and fought the RSS, which has made a lot of impression on me. Another book which I recommend is Husband of a Fanatic by Amitabh Kumar, originally a man who grew up in the Hindu surroundings in Bihar, India, but later came to marry the niece of Asma Jehangir. And this is a very ironic title, of course. But he writes about the riots in Gujarat in 2002 much. He travels to there to try to understand what happened. And then, of course, if you want to read some good essays about sane and not extremist Indian thinking, Amartya Sen, another Nobel laureate, is this book that I found in Calcutta, The Argumentative Indian. This was what I had to say. You can put the last slide, please, which is a nice picture from Tagore's garden in Calcutta. And with that, I'll end my lecture, and I hope we have time for a few questions. I think I kept to the 40 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Can my slides can be uploaded so that I can start?
Dr. Altaf will be doing that?
Yes, I think Dr. Altaf
Yeah, he has.
will be doing that. So I will start. So it will be done, shortly. So my focus will be more Pakistani state. I will be focusing on religious nationalism, but as compared to India, or in contrast to India, at least, in the initial 50 or 60 years, Pakistani state has a major role to play in the religious nationalism and religious extremism. So we have to distinguish, between India and Pakistan in that sense. Of course, state is very powerful both in India and Pakistan, and it plays both. It can help a country more liberal, or it can help a country become more extremist by defining the boundaries of the debate. So if you look at the states, they are primarily the authorities, or which define the boundaries of debate. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what is legitimate and what is not legitimate. And this has been primarily done on the basis of nationalism. So, you can be against the government, you can't be against the state. So that is, what every state says to its people and beyond. So if you look at Pakistan, if you, the first slide is about, the history of Pakistan is from Indus Valley civilization, and then we have many Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms, and then we have starting from around 10th to 11th century, we have Muslim invaders coming in, and a Muslim state is established in India, at least in the northern part of India, which includes Pakistan. And then from there on to 18th century, we have Muslim rule. And then from 18th century to 20th century, we have...
Did you see this slides now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now tell me which one is it. Okay, sorry.
Yes, go to the first one.
This one?
Second,
yeah.
Number 2 slide.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and maybe number 3 slide will be better. So under the British rule, there was a growth of nationalism both in Muslims. Actually, the fight was together to throw out the foreign invaders, but later on in the maybe the last 20 years, from maybe 1930 to 1947, Muslims diverge, and the fight of the most of the Muslims are behind Muslim League, which is fighting for a separate state. And the separate state is based on religious difference. So it's not linguistic difference, it's not ethnic difference, it's primarily religious difference. Why Pakistan is to be formed? Because Muslims are different. Muslims are a different nation than Hindus. So that was the idea. So religion has been important from the very start, or even before the establishment of Pakistan as a country. Pakistan has a checkered history in terms of democracy. We had, most of the time we have military rule or democratic parties ruling, but military playing a large part. So from 1947 to 58, we had democracy, and then from 58 to 71, we have military rule, and then East Pakistan which is Bangladesh, is separated in 1971. And then we had a very brief interlude of democracy from 72 to 77, and then again martial law from 77 to 88, and then again 10 years of democracy, then again General Musharraf's martial law. And now we have, since 2008, a democratic rule, but of course, even under democratic rule, military rules plays a major part and has veto on major decisions. Next slide, please. Next.
Salim, is it the right slide? Should I go back?
Right. Okay. Right. So I was talking about that this religious nationalism has been a major. Can you go back one slide? I think you.
Yeah, this is the last. See.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So while talking about nationalism, we extremism. So this is the next one, or the. Okay. So religious nationalism has played a major role. Next, throughout the history of 70 plus years of history of Pakistan, military has been dominant since 1958 with interludes of democratic rule, and then there is an important on and off alliance of military with the religious elite. So this plays a very important role in Pakistani politics, and then religious extremism. So if you look at religious extremism, there can be two kinds of extremism. One extremism is that in terms of theology, which is excommunicating someone or rejecting someone, like takfir. And then there is separately extremism, which we can argue is based on violence. So some people would agree or would espouse extremism in terms of theology, but not go for violence. And some people would go for violence even when they are in mainstream Islam, right, as far as theology is concerned. So we have to distinguish between two types of extremism. So here we are more concerned about the violent or extremism. And in Pakistan, theological extremism is religious extremism, much older than violent religious extremism. So when we were talking about in the last week, there was by the chairman of Council of Islamic Ideology, he was talking about that it all started in around 1979, when there was this Afghan war or Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, I would argue that the history is much older. Next, please.
Is this is the next one, Dr. Salim? Should I go to another one?
Yeah, but go for the next one.
Okay.
I have explained.
Okay. Next. This is the next one. Should I?
No, it's not changed as far. Yeah, now it's good. So talking about religious nationalism, nationalism can be the last one, please go back one slide. So nationalism can be states. There are many types of nationalism. So there is the nationalism which is sponsored by the state, and then there is the popular nationalism, which can be similar or different. So you can have different groups espousing different types of nationalisms. But the most powerful is, of course, that nationalism which the state propagates, the official state nationalism. So this state nationalism is, of course, not a single version. There are many versions of it, because there are different types of elite which fight to get their version of nationalism accepted and propagated. So in Pakistan, we have civilian elite which have, different idea of state nationalism as compared to military elite which have different idea. So that state nationalism, which in the end comes, is propagated, is after the contestation between different elite groups in the state. And state nationalism is nothing fixed. It changes, and we will discuss it, how it changes. And so I have basically worked on this religious nationalism for my PhD thesis. My book is on this, idea of religious nationalism and how it affects public policy. So I divide Pakistan's history into three periods. So the first period is 1947 to 71. The second one is from 72 to 99, and then the third one starts from 2000. Next slide, please.
This is the next.
So these groups. So yes. So these periods, I have divided it on the basis of three indicators, which is, the first one is Islamic provisions in the constitution. So if you look at Pakistan's history, constitutional history, Pakistan had three constitutions. The first one was in 1956, then there was another constitution in 1962, and the third one, which is the current one, was inaugurated in 1973. So if you look at the history of constitutions and the amendments which have been made, that tells you how the state has changed its views about religious nationalism. What kind of religion the state wants in Pakistan, and how dominant a role it wants the religion to play in Pakistan. So these, I argue that because constitution making changes in constitution is not easy. So it shows a kind of consensus among the elite that what is the role of Islam or religious nationalism in Pakistan or in any other country. The second indicator is the Islamic basis of national symbols. So, you have your anthem and you have your flag, which has, a green color and, star and crescent into it. And then, your country, your capital is named Islamabad. So all these different symbols, national symbols, tells you something about, how the state perceives itself or how the state wants others to perceive itself. And the third one is, Islamic themes on the banknotes. So if you look at all the banknotes, Pakistani rupee currency, you will find pictures on it, and you will find pictures of mosques on it, and you will find pictures of many most tombs of Muslim saints on it. So it also shows you something about how the state perceives religion and how it wants to maybe use religion. So this is the name of the book which I was talking. This is my book. If you want to, of course, download it, or ask for your library to buy it, I would be happy. So next, please. Next slide.
This is the next one.
I didn't get it, so I have the same slide.
I have changed it. It's 1972 to 99. Is it the same? Are you seeing the same?
No, before that.
I can go further. Then it's 2000 plus.
No, back.
That's it.
Yes, this one.
Yeah.
This one is.
Yeah, I think you are
So
getting.
this is the first period. So in this first period, we have us go back, please, one step. In the first period, the state is very centralized, unitary structure. Although Pakistan was a federation from the very start, it has always been a federation, but most of the time it has been ruled as a unitary state. Altaf sir, one slide back.
I went back. Do you want this one? Religious nationalism?
No, one back. 47 to 71.
Okay, this is the one.
Yes, now.
Okay.
It's okay. Okay, and then we have the military bureaucratic leadership was ruling the country during these, maybe 20, 25 years. But this leadership was not religious. So they were, and if you look at many of the leaders that took over from the colonial masters after independence in many post-colonial states, you will find those, the leadership is primarily secular or non-religious. So they were modern, they were more similar or than to the colonial masters than to the most of the people that lived in their country. So these people didn't see any political role of Islam in Pakistan. Yes, they were ready to have a symbolic role because Pakistan was made on the name of Islam, so they had to give something to the people and to the religious elite, but they didn't think that there has to be a political role of Islam. Religious elite initially during this period were not part of the state elite. There was low education, low political participation. Most of the elections were indirect. In fact, the first direct election to the National Assembly happened in 1970. The religion was mostly folk Islam. So I think many of you that know the difference between the folk religion and the high religion. The folk religion is the religion which is primarily linked to the local place. You have local saints. You don't know much about the theology of the religion. You basically accept religion as part of your culture. So that is the folk religion, and then you have the high religion, which is based on texts. So you read a religious text. You have less a connection to your local culture, and you are more accustomed to understand religion through the religious leaders that are trained, and not through the local, Molvi or local imam or local church leader. So these are the things which distinguish the high religion from the folk religion. And in the first phase in Pakistan, most of the people believed in folk religion. And the folk religion is more syncretic. Folk religion was more accepting. in the sense that, you know, many Hindus and Sikhs lived until recently in many of the villages. So people were accepting of different types of religion in their local culture, and they didn't have the kind of extremism which we see later on. Can you go back one slide? I think 1972 to...
Can you see that? I am on that one, 1972 to 99.
I have 2000 onwards.
It's
So
somehow
I don't know.
delaying. We can wait a moment because it's delaying in showing at your...
Okay. And if you look at the, you know, please go one more slide back. So
Okay.
there is one thing I wanted to say.
Okay. This is
So 1947, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you look at the, so Islam was primarily symbolic, and at the state level, and Islam was primarily folk or cultural at the popular level. So both these things were going against extremism. If you trying to find the other in this period, who was the other, you know, in inverted commas, it was the secular nationalist Hindus. So it was not the religious Hindus, it was the secular Hindus who were leading India at that time, Nehru and Shastri and, you know, other Indira Gandhi. And, you know, of course, all these things led to a low, you know, extreme religious extremism. Can we go to the next slide, please, now? 1972 to...
I am on that, 72
okay,
to 99.
we will wait, and then, you know, it will. So so the major change from 1971 to 1972 is the creation of Bangladesh. And Bangladesh basically was, of course, many Indians, of course, argue that it was the end of the two-nation theory, meaning thereby that Muslims are one nation and Hindus are another nation. So the separation of two Muslim majority, you know, both, you know, East Pakistan and West Pakistan into different states meant that there is no one Muslim nation. There are more than one Muslim nations. So if you, from 1972 onwards, we have more, you know, a kind of religious state nationalism. So the state became a little bit more decentralized, but the democratic and military leadership which took over from the previous ones understood or thought that it would be better for them to use Islam. So rather than going for only symbolic Islam, they decided to use Islam for their political advantage. So the political leaders also did that, and the military leadership also used the religious elite and Islam to get their political ends. One of the reasons why this change was the fact that there were 2 or 3 reasons which we can primarily point out. One is, of course, that Pakistanis, the whole nation was demoralized. You know, it was a big defeat in 1971. They had no idea that, you know, they were, you know, told that their military is the best, they are the best. And of course they lost. Then there was also 90,000 prisoners of war. So all these things were very traumatic. So the leadership that came after this defeat decided to project Pakistan in terms of not as a single nation, but as a nation within the Muslim nation, within the bigger Muslim nation. And then, of course, the bigger nation can be compared to the, you know, the Indian nation, which was, you know, even at that time much larger. And of course, it also helped more religious rhetoric and more religious instrumentalization also helped Pakistan to get economic aid from the Muslim countries, Gulf states, which had at that time large bonanza because of tripling of oil prices in 1970s. So these are things, economic perspective and nationalist perspective, both these things helped, or at least gave the idea to the leadership that they should use Islam. Of course, when you are using Islam, it made the religious elite powerful. So they were the ones who then took lead, and then they were they become the arbiters of what is good Islam and what is bad Islam, and what is right Islam and what is not Islam. So there was also increase in education and political participation levels in the country. And then of course at the popular level, we're talking about the state level. At the popular level, we have a slight gradual movement from folk Islam to high religion. So as more people were studying, were able to read Quran, were able to look at different religious commentaries of Islam, they became more detached from their local cultural roots. So the roots were there, but there was this movement toward more high religion, a religion based on texts. So this movement was also there. This movement was also helped by the migration and the coming back of almost millions of Pakistanis who went to Gulf states. Gulf states, of course, had a very narrow, propagated a very narrow type of Islam, and that was this type of Islam was embraced by many of these people who lived there for more than 10 years or more. And then when they came back, they had this idea of what the right Islam was, and that Islam was different from the local Islam. So these things also helped the increase of extremism. If we move from Bhutto to, who was a democratic leader from 72 to 77, then there is a major period from 1977 to 1988 under General Zia. And most of the people will as the chairman of Council of Islamic Ideology was saying, start the link of Islam or Islamic nationalism to Pakistan here in 1971, when General Zia took over. So this was the third martial law in Pakistan, and he was a practicing Muslim as compared to the previous two military rulers who were not. He was interested in using Islam, which the previous two rulers were not. He basically based his his coup on bringing Islam back and throwing away people who didn't consider Islam as the governing ideology of Pakistan. So he used Islam as never before. And during this time, then it was the non-Muslim, the other became the non-Muslims. So non-Muslims became the other, as well as any sect which doesn't accept which is outside the pale of orthodoxy. So if you look at Ahmadis, they were out. There were also many, many people or many religious leaders which thought that Shias are also not Muslims. And then if you look at the 1990s, there is a big, sectarian wave of sectarian violence like never before. So these are the things which were happening, and it increased extremism. It increased extremism against religious minorities, as well as Muslim sects which were not considered, pure or good Muslims. And this led to high extremism. Can we go to the next slide, please?
We are on the next one, 2000 onwards.
Okay, so we will wait. So if you look at the third period, I argue that is continuing. Uh, uh, this period we see a decrease in religious nationalism, and there are various reasons for that. So one of the primary reasons for that was, a realization of the elite, the ruling elite, that the project of using Islam or putting Sharia in as a governing has failed, and has led to not development of Pakistan, but taking Pakistan backward. So the state become more decentralized in this time period, when we have 18th Amendment, other amendments, and then another reason for this realization of the state elite was, of course, the 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, Pakistan was forced to take a U-turn. Pakistan was supporting Taliban. Pakistan was only one of the 3 countries which had recognized Taliban. And of course, Pakistan was sponsoring many of the religious, extremists that were going, in other countries. So this was the time period when, because of the domestic and international pressures, the state elite tried to change. Of course, it couldn't change, immediately, so it would take time. But religious elite at that time, of course, had become very powerful, so they resisted it. So now, if you look at this, the history of Islam's role, or extremism's extremist ideology role in Pakistan, or in Pakistan's public policy or laws, this period is, while 1972 to 1999 was, increase in Islam's role. And in this period, we more see retrenchment. So the state elite are trying, mostly not religious elite, but others are trying to decrease the role of religion. But the religious elite, because they are too powerful, are not allowing that. So we see some change. For example, if you look at Hudud Ordinance, many of you know Hudud Ordinance. So there was this 4 or 5 ordinances by General Zia, which said that the Hudud laws, which are given in Quran, and which said that people should be, the hand of a person should be cut if he is accused of theft, and people can be flogged, and other such things. Of course, I have to point out that these laws, these ordinances are still part of, and remain part of Pakistani laws, but they have never been implemented. But they are there. So in this period, we see that there is an attempt by many people to reduce the role of Islam, and or at least a certain kind of extremist, or a certain type of conservative Islam. For example, there was this attempt to change the Hudud laws, and there was a change that some portion of, for example, in Hudud laws, the rape, for example, was not defined. So it meant that rape, if a woman accuses somebody else, of rape, and if she couldn't prove it, then at least she can be punished for having sex outside marriage, or outside, the boundaries. So she will be. So there was this idea that, and there were 1 or 2 instances also when women were jailed but later released. But this law was there, and it was anti-woman, in the sense that women were afraid to plead their case that they have been raped. And this was changed in 2006, when there was this new law which took the rape offense out of the Hudud ordinance and made it a separate offense, so that a different type of requirement is there for rape. So these are things which, there are many other examples. There are other examples related to laws related to minorities. Minority seats in legislature were increased. Women seats were in legislature were increased. Many type of laws which were there. For example, even in case of, there are other laws like Qasas and Diyat law, which was also reduced in its impact during this period. So there was this attempt of, so if you look at the previous period, there was mostly two Islamic sects were more powerful and basically supported by the state. One was the Hanafi, what's the Deobandi sect, and then there was, of course, the Wahhabi or Ahl Hadith or Salafiya sect. So these two were supported by the state as compared to Braidwi sect and Shias and others. So in this period, in the current period, we see a more return toward, or at least an attempt to return toward a more sectarian Islam, more non-sectarian Islam. But of course, it's not symbolic Islam in the sense that was we saw in the period from the first period from 1947 to 71. So another thing which we see that during the previous period, the state, Pakistani state sponsored or at least turned a blind eye to many religious extremist organizations that were happening, that were working in Pakistan and were killing people. So the violence was a kind of accepted by these organizations. During this period, of course, because the religious extremists actually started to challenge the state. So state, and because of 9/11, the state stood against the religious extremists and fought against them. So starting from 2001 to or 2002 to 2020, we have Pakistani state fighting against religious extremists. And now the main, if you look at the other, the national other, it's non-Muslims extremists, but it's also Muslim extremists. So you have this TTP and other organizations which are considered out of the national legitimate players. There, of course, some people can argue that TTP is still being supported, but primarily it is at the state level it is not. So these are the changes which we see in Pakistan now. That we have moved from more extremism to less extremism, the religious extremism, the major, extent of religious violence we see first in the 1990s when there was this sectarian violence, and then we see in from 2006-7 to 2000 maybe 14-15, when there was this fight against religious terrorists, Islamists who claim to be Muslims, and in that fight, more than 60-70,000 of Pakistanis were killed. So that was the major. Now the extremism in terms of violence, can we go to the next slide?
This is the next one, the conclusion one. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Okay. So the conclusion is that Pakistani state is powerful. So extremism, we have seen that when Pakistani states decide that extremism can be curtailed, should be curtailed, it can curtail it. We have seen it in the 1990s when, after 1990s, the sectarian violence decreased, and it's still not at the level where it was in the 1990s. And we have seen that, religious extremists which were fighting the state in the, from 2006 to 2014-15, they have also been defeated and largely kicked out of Pakistan, or have been kicked out of the public view, or and cannot be, are not able to operationalize themselves and kill as many people as they were before. Religious violence has declined. Social media, so there is, uh, polarization has increased if you look at the social media, but uh, I don't know whether extremism has increased or not. So polarization can increase without increasing extremism. If I want to, as I think it's better to define extremism when it links to violence, when it propagates violence. Other types of extremism are there maybe, but it will be very difficult to balance, stopping that extremism with the ideals and the right of free speech, which most of the people accept, and it's also given in the Pakistani constitution. The in Pakistan, most of the media players have been controlled, because military is. There was a period when when there was this media spring. We can argue that from 2005 to 2000 maybe 15 or something, there was this, media was allowed to question many of the things, question Pakistani military, question Pakistani nationalism. But now things are back to the square one, that media is the media, not the social media, but the print and channels, they are primarily controlled. And the social media have, you know, um, social media has extremists, but even then, Pakistanis, I would argue that most of the political parties, as well as military and others, have wings of, people who are sitting there daily for 7-8 hours or more, and propagating their opinions. Now it's a fight of different ideologies on social media, but I don't know whether it's, this polarization will lead to more extremism or more violence. This is still to be decided. Okay, I thank you. I think I'm done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.